And so let's look at the first one, a while loop. So this is just a new type of loop. It's very similar to a for loop. And it can do similar things, but it has a slightly different structure. And it's actually used for slightly different purposes. But the best way to think about a while loop is it looks like an if statement. But instead of writing if, we write while, some condition, some Boolean condition, and then our colon, indented forward spaces. We have the body of the loop. But that really looks like an if statement, right? If I replace this with an if, it looks the same, except to be body of the if. Except this is not an if. An if only runs one time, right? And this only has the true part of the if, right? If this was an if, let's actually do if. And to cut down on writing, I'm just going to abbreviate. Wow. So if this is true, we run this once. That's what an if does, right? But what a loop does is it runs this on true, then goes back and checks again. And it does it again. And as long as that condition remains true, it will continue. Eventually, this is going to be false. And when it does, we skip the body and just go on to the rest of your code. And then we just run whatever lines are underneath, assuming there are any. So it looks very similar to an if, but the difference is the once thing versus the repeated checking of the condition with the repeated execution of the body. And so it only runs a single time for an if, but multiple times, potentially. A while loop could end actually early. If whatever the condition is false, it will actually end immediately. We're not doing it in this quarter, but this is a sample of the weekly reflection. Some of you may have seen it in some of the write-ups, and I've actually tried to delete them all and occasionally forget. And I deleted all the other questions out of it because I didn't want to deal with it. But there's a question here. We usually ask you how many hours a week you spend outside of class working for the course. Now, in a regular quarter, our hope is for 4-unit class, you do 8 units of work outside of class. So that's like homework, reading, studying. In the summer, it's double that, 16. But unfortunately, I've seen answers, and I can't figure out why. A student will put down 100. So just so you know, a full-time job is 40 hours a week. If you're doing 100, that means you're literally not doing much else. I mean, if you sleep 4 hours a day, that's 32 hours. That doesn't leave much else. If you're doing actually 100 hours of work. But the reality is that I've seen students put huge numbers in here. Like, man, that's a huge number. You really did not work 2 million hours. And then we have an error. Like, no, you can't work that many hours. What about 1,000? Oh, we don't have 1,000 hours in a week. What's the maximum number of hours in a week? Well, 7 times 24 is like 168. So as long as this is invalid, they can't submit this form. And they have to go back and fix it. What if they put 100 in there? Oh, negative 100, I mean. Yeah, you can't work negative hours. You may feel like you're not doing anything, but obviously then it needs to be between 0 or 168 or some number within. And even though some of those numbers are still excessive, 200 hours is actually physically impossible because we haven't invented time travel yet. So we want to do what's called data validation in this case, and we're doing data validation. And we make them fix the number We force them to fix a number as long as it's outside of the valid range. And that's actually something that we could do in a while loop. We could force them to do that. So let's take a look at it. So first I want to actually do a prompt, and I want to get the number of hours from the user, and the user is going to tell me how many hours, and oh, okay, how about, I don't know, 50. And then I will validate it, but let's actually, well, now we actually have that in there. But what if they had done something else? What if they had done 190? We know that's actually invalid. So we can force them to do more, to check. And what did we say the condition was? We said hours needs to be greater than 0, and hours must be, let me actually fix that. So hours must be greater than 0 or equal. You can literally do nothing. Or it must be less than equal 168. But I want to stop when they get it right. I want to stop when they get it right. And to stop it, I have to think, well, how do I write a Boolean condition to check if they got it wrong? So what's wrong? So this is right. Let's think about what wrong means. What if the hours are less than 0? That's wrong. Repeat. What if the hours are greater than 168? Well, that's actually physically impossible. Repeat. Well, I have two Boolean conditions. You can never have them both true at the same time, so I can't use an and statement to put them together because they'll never actually both be true since it's the same variable. But we can put an or in here and say, oh, if it's less than 0, if that's true, fix it. If it's greater than 168, fix it. And so we'll reprompt the user to fix it if they're out of the range. So then let's say, while hours less than 0 or hours greater than 168, we tell them they made an error. Invalid number of hours. Please try again. And I forgot something. So let's fix it. And then after they've made the mistake, after we've told them they made a mistake, we ask them to do it again. And less than, not supported. Oh, guess what I forgot to do? I forgot to do the conversion. So this should be a float, but that's actually not the problem yet. I'm going to make that exit again. 190. Because remember, we wanted to use numbers. Float hours can have fractionals and 15-minute increments or something. So you need to make sure it's a float. And now, if I entered 190, that was wrong. So then I do 200 minus 5 minus 9. Oops, I forgot to do a minus. I did 0. Well, 19 worked, and it ended the loop. So as long as they're putting in invalid numbers, it will repeat. So this is called data validation. And we could print something out afterward. I mean, we could have actually wrote this in a file. In fact, it would probably have been smarter to write this in a file. So let's actually quickly put it into a file. Remember, I need the float. I need the loop. And let me fix the tabbing. And then let's just say after we're done, valid number of hours, form says accepted. And this is So 200, whoops. 200, 290, 300, minus 20, minus 1. I didn't do any work this. Oh, 0. So now we have a validation loop. And so with that validation loop, we can now make sure the user has actually put in valid data. And so as long as this is true, and remember on the first one, 200, this was true, so we kept going. And then 290, this is true, kept going. Eventually I had minus 20, so this was true, so we kept going. And eventually I had 0. And this was false, and this was false, so both were false. So false or false means the whole thing is false, which means the loop exited. So as long as this condition is true, the while loop continues. And we can write this condition in different ways. I could actually do the and, and so I could do this in the correct pattern, the writes with an and statement, and then do a not. Well, not right or not correct, but that's just another way of writing it. But as long as it's true, we just keep going to validate that data. And that's a typical thing that we do with loops when dealing with user input, where they may put something invalid.